going to tackle each one of these. Happy to listen to any different points of view. Can pre-qualification criteria be included? How do we treat functionality? What about the options to score? Now, I'm going to put this, the 10 and the 20 points discussion towards the back end of this. What about local production content? What about subcontracting objective criteria and cancellation? Let's see if we can quickly address each one of these. First one, can pre-qualification criteria be included in your preference policy? So the old regulation 4, can you put that into your preferential procurement policy? Here's a view, rather leave it out. The Supreme Court of Appeal declared regulation 4 unlawful. That word unlawful was different to the word invalid. And they said it is unlawful because there is no provision in the framework for this pre-qualification mechanism. So they said it's unlawful because the framework doesn't allow you to have this pre-qualification. That's why they said it is unlawful. I have heard a fairly complicated legal argument that can be put together to justify the use of pre-qualification. It requires case law. The AXA Imperial case is one of those. It requires a very detailed review of the minority judgment in the Court's decision, the majority judgment in the Court's decision, and the Supreme Court of Appeals decision. And when you put all of that together through that very complicated legal argument, might be able to justify why it is still acceptable to put it in. I'm not comfortable with that, and I haven't heard a detailed legal argument, but it was just very quickly explained what that legal argument is. So I've not seen that. I think that if you were to include that, you've got certainly a higher probability of being challenged by bidders and also audit findings. So our current view would be to leave it out. For price quotations, if anything, build in a bit of a priority sequence into the methodology for deciding who it is that you're going to invite for your price quotations for CSD. There is an opportunity in that instruction 2 gave us to describe that methodology. You can build into that methodology a bit of a preference system to help you choose who it is that you're going to be inviting to submit quotes. So this is not a pre-qualification. This is just saying, who do we invite? Okay? Don't then put anything into quotation on pre-qualification. You just decide who you invite. If you are aggressive, you could also look at building an argument together to describe the circumstances that you would deviate from competitive bidding in your policy. Use the other means mechanism to say, we're not going to pre-qualify. We're just going to go directly to these 3 Black-owned, youth Black-owned organizations, just asking them to bid. Subcontracting we'll talk about later, and I'm talking about the subcontracting that existed with the old Regulation 4, Regulation 4 being the pre-qualification regulation. So that's the suggestion on whether you should use pre-qualification policy or not. Any 5 on functionality. We've had previous discussions. If you missed it, there is a video on the YouTube channel on the treatment of functionality. Here's some thoughts. Leave it out of your preferential procurement policy. It doesn't belong in the preferential procurement policy functionality. It belongs in the SCM policy, not the preferential procurement policy. The preferential procurement policy is once we have an acceptable bid, this is how we decide who to award it to. If there's anything that you do in your preferential procurement policy, it's focused on the definition of acceptable tender. And please look again, the starting point is not the regulation for the policy. The starting point for the policy is not the regulation. The starting point for the policy policy is the Act. The framework is in the Act. Please look carefully at Section 1 of the Act. If you do put something in the policy, minimize what you put into the policy. It makes no sense to just carry on doing what we've been doing over the last 11 years with this threshold idea when there are so many other options that can be used to decide whether a bid is acceptable or not. Just to say now, the idea of a minimum threshold is one of many options. By the way, as a suggestion, stop using the word functional criteria. We're the only country in the world, by the way, in the public sector that uses this term functional criteria. Rather use selection criteria or evaluation criteria. There are some thoughts on treatment of functionality. So because it's not in the regulation, it doesn't mean that you don't do it. You've still got to do it. You've still got to apply functionality, what we used to call functionality. You still need to have some selection process to decide if the bid is accepted or not. You don't need to put it into the preferential policy. Just having the preferential procurement policy is the definition of acceptable tender, and you should be covered. CPC Claire has got some good perspectives that he's put in there. Possible at the institutional level, we acknowledge that it can stand support, but if you issue a circular approved by the accounting officer, it's possible to say, okay, this would mean that you make clear with officers corrective management requirements based on circular issued on a policy line. That's a view. So there's different views, and I think possibly sharing the same view that Andy has to be careful to listen to perspectives of Saluba as well as points from Zoom. Let's move on to the next one. What happens to the old Regulation 8 on local production and local content? The old regulation, local production, local content. Now, if you were to look at the RDP white paper that is referred to in the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, there certainly is a case to be made that local production and local content could be a specific goal. Our view is at the moment, suggestion is at the moment, because you have a choice that unless you've got a very significant portion of your spend, which is on those designated sectors, rather exclude the use of local production, local content, or current version of the preferential policy, and leave out the SPD, MBD 6.2, and HSC and those requirements. They have not been kind to small businesses. They have been difficult to implement, and unless you really a Department of Defense or someone that's or health that is buying significant numbers of products that have been designated, probably rather just leave this out. There is a chance that the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is going to work with the National Treasury to come up with an instruction that they could issue under the PFMA and the MF. It's not going to happen under the triple PFA at this point in time. Just a suggestion. So it's optional. DTIC would say they would encourage you, but it's not a legal requirement that you have it for your policy. It's not a as of 13 January, there's no prescription of local content, so we can have a holiday for a while, absolutely. And we're suggesting that if you've got something, a quotation or a tender, which is due to go out before the 13th of January, delay it a little bit, put it out after the 13th of January, and you'll certainly find it a lot easier to process. What about subcontracting Regulation 9? So Regulation 9, the old regulation said that if feasible, you must include a clause to subcontract at least 30% to one of the designated groups, and then they list the designated groups. So that's what Regulation 9 says. If feasible, you must. If it's more than 30%. The Supreme Court of Appeal also declared this one to be unlawful, not invalid, unlawful. So probably at this point in time, leave it out as a policy decision, as a condition of tender. There is plenty of practice, of evidence that this works as a condition of contract, subcontracting is a condition of contract. And please be aware, these are two distinct mechanisms. The condition of contract says to the bidder, when you get the deal, you must subcontract. A condition of tender says, in your tender, you must tell me who it is that you're going to be subcontracting to, and we will decide if what you tell us in the tender document makes sense or not, and if it doesn't make sense, you will disqualify. That's a condition of tender. The condition of tender is one of the aspects that's mentioned in Section 1 of the PFA. Condition of contract is different. Certainly continue to use subcontracting as a condition of contract. Don't make it a condition. What about objective criteria that's currently situated in Regulation 11? Now, Regulation 11 says, let me step back first before we get into regulation, what regulation is. There's a statement in the Act, Section 2(1)(f) of the Act, that says that you must award it to the one that scores the highest points unless objective criteria justify awarding to someone else. So that's a very, very powerful mechanism that exists in the Act that says that you can use this mechanism called objective criteria to award a quotation or a tender or a bid to someone who did not score the highest points. That's what the Act says. What Regulation 11 said is that if you intend to use that objective criteria mechanism, you must put in your tender documents the objective criteria. The implementation guide said that objective criteria cannot be functional criteria and it cannot be BBB criteria. And many of us at that point stopped and we didn't use objective criteria to 1F because we didn't know how to put it necessarily in our tender documents and describe what it is. If it's not functionality and it's not true. So we didn't. For your preferential procurement policy, don't put yourself in the same predicament and say that you must publish the objective criteria in the tender documents. Okay? Don't do that. At most, if you really want to do something, you might just use the word may. The tender document may include the objective criteria, but don't limit yourself to using just the objective criteria that's put in the document. There are many, many position papers and thoughts out there. I can refer you to one by Alan Painter that talks very specifically about why it's actually very difficult to decide what the objective criteria are and put it into the tender document. It's practical to do that. You probably, so don't say that you must publish the objective criteria. You're shooting yourself in the foot as far as that is concerned. You certainly do want to get the training, get your SOPs in place on how you're going to treat objective criteria in the evaluation process post 16 January. It is a powerful mechanism, and it's a mechanism that you're probably going to be using more than you have in past couple of years. So just watch that one on regulation. Regulation 13 of the 2017 regulations gives the conditions for cancelling a bid. Those regulations for cancelling a bid do not exist in the 2022 regulations. There aren't any in the 2022 regulations on the cancellation of bids or price quotations. Suggestion is leave it out of your preferential procurement policy. If you really want to put something in, put it into your SEM policy. Exclude material irregularity that was not defined when the 2017 regulations came out. It has subsequently been defined in the Public Audit Amendment Act, and the material irregularity needs to actually be something that the Auditor General needs to decide on after the contract has been awarded and you've spent the money. So to try and have material irregularity as a reason for cancelling a tender before you've even awarded the tender is not practical at this point in time. So don't put that in as one of the conditions. Treasury have said that they may issue instruction for PFMA, circular for local government in the future. Remember, this is probably not something that you're going to have to use straight away on the 16th of January. If there is a tender you want to cancel on the 16th of January, it is probably a tender that was issued under the Preferential Procurement Regulations 2017. And so the conditions that existed, the law that applied at the time you issued the tender is what will apply when you evaluate and award the tender. So you will still apply those conditions of tender after the 16th, the conditions for cancelling a tender after the 16th of January, but you'll be applying the rules as per the 2017 regulation, not the 2022 regulations. The 2022 regulations and cancellation will only come in on those tenders that you issue on the 16th of January. And it's going to be a while before those get cancelled. So this is not necessarily something that is urgent. It is not something that you need to comply with from a preferential procurement regulations perspective, because it's not in PPR 2022. It's also not mentioned in the Act. So the likelihood of any finding or any practical issue that you might have on the 16th of January and the couple of weeks that follow thereafter is probably not a significant risk. So just bear that in mind. Any questions on the points that I've covered so far? One more small matter to just quickly share with you and give you some perspectives before we move forward. Advocate Nsuluba, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. I just wanted to in a way to assist the colleagues, Sean, do you have all this dissection by way of a presentation so that the colleagues have got a document that they can use as authority? Because you are citing very important facts that are useful for them to get moving. The various dissection of these regulations, I think you are actually assisting the process, and the person can come out of this meeting with a rough and dirty policy now.
Yeah.
So if you could have that by way of maybe part of your presentation, that would very much assist the process, John.
We'll see if I can do a little bit of an update to this.
Okay.
Because I do have the slides elsewhere. Good point. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks very much.
Good one. So regulations 6.3 to 6.9 have got a couple of other interesting requirements. The one is proof of triple BEE. The other one is the 25% subcontracting condition. And then there's one on market-related pricing and negotiations. Now, here is something which is not necessarily going to be an easy one to follow for all of us right now. But let me just quickly share this with you. I would not at the moment put proof of as a condition of tender on these specific goals that we are going to be focused on. If we reflect back on the proof of BBBE, this has not been an easy thing for supply chain. We've got hung up in issues of has it been certified? Is it a photocopy of a certified copy? Is this the certified date less than 4 months or older than 4 months? And you know, is it a copy? Is it an original? Is it, you know, just it's not been an easy thing, and has sometimes become a bit of a bottleneck in the process. Now that's on BBBE. I am horrified to think what we're going to be doing to try and ask for proof of gender, for proof of youth, for proof, all of these things we can get proof of, okay? But to put this in as a condition of tender in our tender documents is going to just absolutely bring supply chain to a grinding halt if we start to now request all of the proof from all of the bidders as a condition of tender. Our recommendation is change SPD MBD 6.1 to a declaration. 6.2 is a declaration. There's nothing stopping us from making 6.1 declaration. There's nothing stopping us from looking at CSD as proof. And there's nothing stopping us from making the submission of proof a suspensive condition on award. So be very careful about the fact that we're going to go into this new world where we've got all these specific goals, and we're going to make these specific goals a condition of tender upfront. Can you imagine the organization that received 1,200 tender responses to a particular tender that they put out, going through every one of those now, every one of those, checking all the specific goals, the proof of the specific goals on all of them, when all they actually need to look at is ensuring that they've got proof of the specific goals for the one that's going to get. Just be careful of this. I have nightmares thinking about being sent out to a supplier to check the proof that the people are women. Be very careful. ID document, Billy, you're right. Everything in there can be proof, but be careful about making the proof a condition of tender. Billy, the difficulty we've got right now with one document, proof of PPP, is going to be multiplied 10, 15 times. When we now look at ID documents, we look at locality issues, we look at rural, we just really, it is going to be so difficult that we start looking at every single ID copy of the people on all the people that have been submitted, right? It is just so difficult. Really avoid this, avoid it. Kandi, avoid this thing of proof on as a condition of tender. There's nothing stopping us from having proof as on a suspensive condition on board. So now you're spot on. Very good, very good. And ID numbers, by the way, don't use the CSD. as the departure point, it's there, it's in, most of the information is CSD. And, there's lots of other points of view, but state black Regs, but how was it through the third point? Very different. We're going to sincerely be very careful about building all of this proof stuff into your policy. Right? There's no need for that 25% issue that we had in the current the current preferential procurement. That statement that exists now on the 25% subcontract, 11 years after that statement first came out, there are supply chain teams that have no idea what that 25% is. You may not be awarded the points if you subcontracted more than 25% in anything that is the same or worse than you, less it is in PME. But avoid it. Sincerely, it's not necessary now, because we're going to have subcontracting as a condition of contract, not a condition of tender. Leave out the market-related pricing references that we've got in the current preferential procurement. It is still one of the most difficult things to determine market-related pricing. Again, I've had a look at it. I've done the research. We're the only country in the world that uses market-related pricing as a test of price reasonableness. Use price reasonableness. Don't use market-related pricing. This has got a very, very specific connotation. Certainly, if there's anything, have a look at your SOP. So have a look at how you're going to deal with abnormally low bids. All right. Yeah, there's the US got a good one there. Really should be documents. Yeah, very good one. Advocate in Zuluba.
Thank you, Sean, and thanks for this beautiful guidelines. However, Sean, your bullet number 3 from the bottom.
Yes.
The issue of fronting, Sean.
Yes.
You're saying that statement must be left, and I'm asking myself, how do we then ensure that we don't regress as an organization? Because fronting is easy to prove because the CIPC documents are there. It's the easiest thing to be able to know. It's not hidden. So why are we? And that document is not even. It is the easiest one to get from the CIPC knowledge base. Why now are we leaving that?
No, I'm saying put it in. Put no fronting in.
Oh, okay.
But what we mustn't do is put the 25% subcontracting issue into the document. So that 25% subcontracting was a mechanism to address fronting. Just put in your policy no fronting. Don't try and have this 25% issue. I think we're on the same page.
Okay, I hear you. But let me take you to the suspensive conditions, Sean. The practical implication of this. I mean, in wills we use suspensive conditions. It means then that ideally, if then there is an approval process of the whole value chain of this particular tender, the accounting officer will not be able to actually do the full approval without the matters that are part of the suspensive condition. If you get what I'm saying.
I hear you.
Now as proof. Now we then need, there are two advantages to it. One being that you will have documents that are not getting scaled through the machine. You will have them at the time when they are needed. But you also run the risk that if then those documents are not there, either you will have the award not being finalized. So how do we manage that risk? You need not answer it, but I'm sharing it with colleagues because having been involved in this space, documents would come to you for signature. Those proofs are already stale and you cannot approve of using them as a basis. So using it as a suspensive condition solves that problem. But then how do we deal with the risk of maybe the delay in the submission? Where do you think then that could be factored in to make sure then that the whole thing is complete? In terms of time frame for submission, I suppose.
So yes, and we got to build it into the back end of the process. Honor is giving some points there. So what we try to avoid is we've built in a due diligence process on every bid that gets submitted. And that's a massive administrative overhead where we actually want the due diligence to happen to the one that's going to get it. So we just want to shift it to the back end. Maybe suspensive condition was not the right term. Maybe it is subject to due diligence before award.
No, it's fine when you call it suspensive, Sean, because you are saying you're not removing the qualitative evidence, because then you are putting it as the final. And what I like is the currency of those documents. And those documents can be obtained actually through various mechanisms within the system itself, if really you are interoperable. But that's a discussion for another day, talking about systems.
All right, just be very careful. Now, I've referenced SPD 6.1. Those who are on the Telegram group would have seen my comments last week about National Treasury saying that they're going to issue an updated SPD 6.1. First point, there is no empowering legislation that allows them to do that. There isn't any. So whether they can do that or not, I'm unsure. There is nothing that says National Treasury, you can issue a circular or you can issue a guideline. 6.1 was issued as part of it when the guidelines were issued. 6.1. Number two, I do not know what they're going to put in 6.1 when there are 720 different ways that you can decide how to do your point scoring. So I don't know what they're going to put in 6.1 when there's so many different ways of deciding how you're going to score the points. Number three, those of you who remember the days before 2010 will know that there was not one document called 6.1. There were 12 SPD 6 points, MBD 6 points. There was an MBD 6.1. There was an MBD 6.2. There was an MBD 6.3. There was an MBD 6.4. There's an MBD 6.5 up to MBD 6.12. If we're going to wait for Treasury to issue 12, this is the risk, 12 MBD 6.2 X's, and we're going to start building those into our quotations processes on the 16th of, we need to find ways to reduce the administrative burden. We need to find ways to make it. Start working on your 6.1 now. There is nothing preventing, there's nothing empowering National Treasury to issue a 6.1 that you have to comply with. Work on your own version of 6.1 and get ready for 16th of January. Don't wait for Treasury. Let's talk about the 10 and the 20 points. will refer you to an excellent presentation that was done by Tandy about 3 or 4 weeks ago on the options for the 10 and the 20 points. Here is just a couple of points to help you get to grips with what this is all about. Remember the 10 and the 20 points is in the framework for the Preferential Procurement Policy, and it refers to the specific goals as contemplated in paragraph D. 10 points may be allocated for specific goals as contemplated in paragraph D. 20 points may be allocated to specific goals as contemplated in paragraph D. Okay. That's where the specific goals in the 10 and the 20 points come from. That's the statement in the Framework Act. That's the starting point. Now, the specific goals is defined in the regulations to mean specific goals contemplated in section 2(1)(d) of the Act, which may include contracting persons, categories of persons that were involved by discrimination on the basis of race, gender, and disability, including the implementation of programs, construction development programs. So that's what the specific goals is. Very, very important to look at the wording that's used, that persons or categories of persons historically disadvantaged by unfair discrimination on the basis of race, gender, and disability, and then it brings in the RVP table. Okay, so you've raised your hand. Go ahead. So, hey, Koketso, you're welcome to unmute. Well, let's see if we can hear you. Oh, Koketso, your mic is not working. Maybe put something in the text. Put something in the chat, Koketso. Go ahead, Koketso.
Thanks, Sean. Sean, this section, I always say, in a developmental state, we have developmental issues that define how we move, and that is why we ended up with AU 2063, SDGs, UN goals, and as well as NDP. But all these are supposed to root themselves from the original documents. Where am I getting to, Sean? I want to reiterate what I said when we had Treasury representing. If you look at this provision, clearly, this provision, you will need to define it more broadly to then appreciate some of the movements that have been in the policy landscape. For example, you would have disabilities. But believe you me, it's not something that was not known during the RDP process. But there was a time when there was a Paris resolution which began to say you have a country that has been formed because of people who sacrificed. And because of those policy imperatives, then a process began that came as far back as 1998. Now, why am I raising this? I'm raising it because Sean, if you go to the mining sector and the construction at DPW, they've begun to factor the provision of military veterans so sharply, and you will not read it in what we have in front of us. Now, the question I was asking, which I think you might have some wisdom in it, how do we assist our organization, our colleagues to be able to have the goals comprehensively captured so that the people we service are not compromised? I even went to a point of saying, if you look at our database now, it has begun to, the Treasury one, has begun to capture those imperatives. And they are there because there's a legislation that says whichever legislation existed before, it is not as important as this one. And interpretation of statutes says when that is said, it becomes sacrosanct. So how do we deal with such situations, Sean? Just assist us with your wisdom and your experience in dealing with these matters across organs of state.
I'm not sure I understand, and I think you might be able to help more. Are you saying, how do we get to determine the specific goals?
I'm saying, Sean, for example, the specific goals you have raised, okay, that's taken care of in some pieces of legislation. There's gender, it's taken care of somewhere in terms of the treaties. Disability is taken care of in terms of the UN protocols, and as a result, then it's there. But the military veterans is not a gender issue. It is not a race issue. It is not a disability issue. It covers all of them. I'm using it as an example because that's a serious transformative matter where there are clear benefits that each organ of state must provide. And that organization has just gone to establish a national database on which organ of state provides what. If you go to that Act, Section 5, read with Section, I think Section 6 and Section 9, it makes it a preemptory that be done by organs of state, not directly. So how do we capture such? I'm just giving it as an example. There might be others. I don't want to talk about disabilities already here. I want to talk about something that is not here. Yes.
Let me give you another example, and I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but just to illustrate the point. When we discuss this with universities, for example, they would love to prefer students of the university, give preference to students of enterprises that are owned by students of the university. So the question you're asking is, where do we find those specific goals? As the SEM team, who will tell us that? Who will tell us that it's students, that it's military veterans, that it is unemployed mothers in rural areas? Where do we find that from? That's the question. Is that the question you're asking?
Okay. Let me answer it myself. If one is using this particular provision together with the medium-term strategic framework goals, which are guiding the country, whose origin is the NDP implementation program, you would have collectively pooled, and these are supposed to already to be, like I was saying to you, in the strategic plans of all these organs of state, because you have a table there that talks about any legislation that impacts and which section, what are the implications for the organization. I'm just worried that the people who are supposed to service might be compromised by this hierarchical approach that we are adopting. And probably that is the reason why some of us are actually having keen interest on this process, because you wouldn't want to reduce the value of the people who are supposed to serve by just looking at the origin, the genesis of the transformation, and you're not looking at how the transformation developmentally ended being like. Because the medium-term strategic framework had become and it remains the pillar of this government, because it is how we are measured at government level, at state level, at AU level, at UN level, because it captures everything that talks about the country. And it translates at provincial, it translates at municipal, you'll find it at MINMEC. And it does not only talk about the three things. I feel I must raise that.
Very good.
And that's why this debate belongs to executive authorities. I said last time, it belongs to clusters, DG clusters, because that is the direction that must be factored down for then the procurement people to factor them as the key specific goals. You are not prescribing, but the policy trajectory of a country has already done in terms of regulation 5.2 of the Treasury regulations. That's still sacrosanct for how you develop a strategic plan.
It's a strategic, eh? Very important. Thank you. Let's Supply chain. If you want to get to the point that you deserve a seat at a Manco and Exco, because you report directly to the CEO or not to the CFO. There's the time to start shining. There's the time to start shining. So these are the options. This is what Tanya presented a couple of weeks ago. There are the specific goals. We'll talk through those that were in the 2001 regulations. Yes, there is a model. I'm going to share with you some thoughts around just going with the triple scorecard. Risky, but it is an option. There is the option of combining the scorecard and the specific goal. This was confirmed yesterday in a discussion I was in, that the Western Cape has now finalized their approach to the scorecard, and they're going to be using to the 10 and the 20 points. They're going to be using 50% of the points will be a maximum, but sorry, at least 50% of the points will be on a 50 scorecard, and 50% will be on locality, up to 50% on locality. So a combination of both specific goals and scorecards is option 3. And option 4, which we're all getting more and more comfortable with, is where you have multiple specific goals with some triple B scorecard attributes or elements or scores, such as enterprises which are these 51% owned by military veterans with a level 1 in scorecard will get 7 points. And you can continue to break this down in some way. You need to start with understanding what the are, what your specific goals are, which is what if you go with the triple B scorecard, don't be naive. Treasury have said in their presentations, and I'm quoting the slide numbers where they've said this: using the triple B status level of contributor does not provide the opportunity to choose specific goals. Furthermore, references made in the final revised regulations to specific goals are not triple B status level of contributor for the reasons mentioned earlier in the book. Therefore, the 20 points will be allocated for specific goals, not for triple B status level. This is National Treasury's position. A discussion I was in yesterday, seems like the DTIC are buying into this. Okay, I don't think that DTIC are necessarily far from this position. So if you go with the triple B scorecard, if you go with the table that you currently have, if you're a level 1, you score 20 points. If you're level 2, you score 18 points. You go with that, no, there's a risk. Treasury have said those do not constitute specific goals. There's a risk of a non-compliance finding if you go that route. There is a risk. If you choose to do that, of course, you want to minimize the impact of change. If you choose to do this, my suggestion is that you develop a legal argument with support from your legal team to say there is a conflict between the Act and the triple PFA. So you've got to start with, why are you doing that? You're doing it because there's a conflict between the Act and the triple PFA. The triple PFA refers to specific goals. The triple B Act refers to a code of good practice, a scorecard. Your point would be there is a conflict. Where there is a conflict, the triple B Act will prevail, and therefore the trumping clause will, because there's a trumping clause specifically in the Act, and therefore you're using the scorecard. We suggest you get at least one formal legal opinion to support you in this one, but know that there are risks of finding and there are risks of challenges. But yes, it's going to be an easy one to do. I see we've got a couple of hands that have been raised. Kevin, I think was the third one. There were others that raised their hand. Well, but go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, Sean, I have a bit of a problem with the statement issued by National Treasury. And I'll tell you why. Because what Treasury is actually doing, Sean, maybe if you can just go to your previous slide, please. In that presentation, which Treasury provided, with the road shows throughout the country, and they went to all the provinces where they spoke to them about the fact that using triple BE status level of contributor, in fact, they are prescribing in that particular presentation by saying to organs of state that you mustn't use it. My question is that, considering what the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Concord said, is it within Treasury's power to tell an organ of state, you cannot use BE status level of contributor in your policy? Are they not acting beyond their powers? Isn't that the exact reason why the Preferential Procurement Regulation of 2017 was declared unconstitutional? So that is my challenge, because it sort of put organs of state now in a difficult position. Because when we look at what government policy is, government's policy is to support and promote Black economic empowerment. Now, if we look at socio-economic objectives, specific objectives, in terms of the 2001 regulation and the regulation of 2022, and it talks about historically disadvantaged individual, you can allocate points out of the 20 for it. Now the question is, what is the measurement criteria that you're going to use to allocate points for HDI? So if you say that I want to allocate points for HDI, and specifically Black people, then what is your measurement criteria that you're going to use? Now, the first things that comes to mind, if you want to use a criteria, to say, why not apply then your status level of contributor in that instance? When our Treasury comes and Treasury says, hey, sorry, big boss have spoken. I come from Treasuries, and big boss has spoken. Is it within Treasury's power to make that kind of statement? And what prevents an organ of state to use it in the policy? Because it is organ of state's policy now to state, how am I going to allocate points out of 20 and out of 10?
Kevin?
I'm throwing spanner in the works.
No, you're well done. Kevin? The specific goals that are discussed in terms of race, gender, disability,
and the other
are those specific goals not included in the scorecard? And therefore, is the scorecard not a all-encompassing perspective on those specific goals? I'm agreeing with you. And therefore, the specific goals are catered for in the scorecard.
I agree with you, Sean.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree with you because within those, even if, yes, the specific goals definitely talk to the scorecard. Because if you talk about HDI and you say you want to promote Black economic empowerment, you want to allocate points for previous disadvantaged individuals, which includes Black people, then what prevents you by saying that I want to use the BE level scorecard? What prevents you by saying I want to allocate points only for level 1 and level 2 up to a certain threshold value?
Are you saying, Kevin, that maybe my suggestion to create this argument that there's a conflict is maybe not even necessary, and that you don't worry about a conflict? You just say, hey, we're just going to use the score. Is that what you suggested?
I'm just throwing it, as to maybe for discussion purposes, because because that specific, I've seen it. I was part of that presentation when Treasury gave that presentation to national departments, and I picked up. So, and I've raised it with them, Now I can understand where Treasury comes from, but the question is, obviously they look at what the Supreme Court of Appeals and the Concord judgment is, but are they empowered in their presentation to include those 2 bullet points in there?
And it's a presentation, hey?
Yes. Shouldn't they leave it open now to the organ of state to make up their own mind what they want to include? Now they've thrown apple cart totally, upside down with those 2 statements. And I can assure you, there's a lot of people that, and I know, it's a fact. People will say, but this is what Treasury says we cannot do. The question is, Treasury empowered to do that?
Doesn't carry the weight. Let's before we go to the points that were raised, Komazula, you're welcome to unmute and talk. We will also talk about the points that were raised in the chat.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome.
For this discussion. Well, my network is not so clear, but now what I'm thinking is that you remember at some stage the president announced that 40% of the business should be given to women. But now what happened to the economic development? Because they used to issue those provincial targets to say maybe, okay, for women it's 40%, for youth it's 35%, for PWDs is 3%, and for military veterans is 2%. Now, my strategy would be, in order to have the 80-20 or 90-10, the 10 points and the 20 points, I would draw up the BI report to those who are using the SEP. It gives you the procurement spend of the department to say, okay, we have already spent 45% on women, maybe 20% on youth. Then when we develop those strategies for our department, we would say, oh, okay, the women have been given enough businesses and they have exceeded the target. But with youth, they said it should be 35% and we're at 20%. Now I can say, I can be able to explain, to say, why did I give business to youth? Because at least we are lacking about 25% to empower those youth with military veterans and so forth and so forth. So we would have the basis of saying, why did you target the specific group? You have, you are able to respond. So no, based on the set target and based on our performance, this is how we are. We decided to empower the remaining in order to reach those set targets.
Yeah. And some would have different targets. Some would have targets around enterprises located in townships. That was a great point. Well done. Thank you. Advocate Nsaluva, and then we'll go to the comments that were raised in the chat.
Thank you, Sean. Just leaning on what the colleague has said, I think the pronouncements on the cabinet mahotlas, the SOPAs, the SOFAs, and the SONAs, it's high time that they find expression in the legal instruments. I think the challenge we have is that they become pronouncements that don't have a standing legally. And as such, it's difficult to actually police their implementation. Exactly what she has just said. But for me, I'm still saying, going back to what the colleague was talking about slide 14, the very clear way of dealing with these things is, what is the legal origin of a BEE status contributor? We start there. You go to that legal provision and you look at how has it been phrased. Is it something you may do or something you must do? If something that you must do, then you go to what is the standing of this legislation vis-a-vis others? Because in terms of interpretation of statutes, that is very important. If that legislation says this legislation stands above any other, then something else must change that. It stands. It will be changed by amendment or by implementation and interpretation by the court of law. So there is no way. I'm adding to what he was saying, that I think the colleagues, in a sense, they were assisting, but in a sense, they were removing themselves from the problem. I think what was important is to begin to say the owner of that particular provision must speak on it. I'll leave it just there. And that talks about collaboration across government or organs of state or policy departments, which is already there. But we need just to make sure that a specific way of getting what we are looking for is provided, because policy departments have a mechanism of providing what are the policy options going forward. And I want to repeat, those are the ones that inform a strategic plan for the 5 years and your operational plan. If they are not there, it means then the strategic plan cannot be the one that can be used, because your support plans, which is what we are talking about now, your supply chain, your procurement, are those requirements. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Really some great points there. And Billy, you're talking in the comments about the framework and 2173, which refers to the framework, and the FA refers to, this is the framework, the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, that directly references 2173. And that although the BBBE Act also refers to framework, by the way, you're saying it is not the framework. But there is another intersection with these two, and that's the reference to the Preferential Procurement Policy. So 2.1 of the PPPFA says you must determine the Preferential Procurement Policy. 10.1b of the BBBE Act says that you must apply the relevant code of good practice when determining the Preferential Procurement Policy. So the intersection is in those two statements, the two different acts. It's not necessarily that it's a framework, but it's that statement. So it's applying the relevant code of good practice in determining versus the specific goals is potentially where it is. Now, listen, everybody listen to what Kevin has said. I'm just suggesting here that there is a risk of a finding, we don't know yet, there's a risk of a finding if the AG decides to listen carefully to what National Treasury have said, you need to have some basis to argue why you're going to continue with the scorecard. So Preferential has raised a great point there, a number of points, to say that maybe it isn't the right one. And you know, because we've got these massive white companies that have got the level ones, and so you know, that is not working. And the point that was raised earlier that we don't have those mechanisms in place to prefer black women, to prefer black youth, for example. We don't have those mechanisms. We just use the scorecard. So there's different ways. If you choose to use the scorecard, you need to have a reason why. The one could be you take Kevin's perspective and you say, we have listened to what National Treasury have said, but they do not decide what we use. We must determine how we're going to use the scorecard, and this is the way we've done. If you want to go even further, you might then want to try and develop some legal argument to say that there's a conflict. And the Secretariat's point is, you know, Treasury have said there isn't a conflict, they're just misaligned. You know, we've got two departments that are not talking to each other. Massively disappointed yesterday when DTIC said we haven't seen the presentation that National Treasury have been showing. Please can you give it to us? And at the end of the discussion, National Treasury said, please can you send us the presentation that DTIC has just done, and then we'll give some comments. So they're not talking to each other. So we need to definitely find a way to rationalize it. These are options. Kevin has given you one, we've given you another one here. You need to find some way to justify why it is that you're doing that, because there are different points of all right, here is the other one. If you look at the 2001 regulations, they give us the specific goals. They describe those specific goals. And these are just examples. There are some more that follow towards the back end. But it's equity ownership by HDIs, promotion of local enterprise, export oriented promotion of SMEs, etc., located in a particular province in a region and municipality. Enterprises located in rural areas. There are other specific goals that we bring in. This is the other way to do it, and potentially here we've got some of the mechanisms that we can use then to try and achieve those objectives that you're talking about there, around saying, hey, how do we promote HDI? How do we promote women? How do we prefer an enterprise that is about women? We've got to try and first try and get to that. Here is a suggestion. Sorry, there are. Let me just quickly. Fikile, my apologies. You did have your hand up earlier. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. My points might have been overtaken by the last two slides that you have presented, but I wanted to underscore an issue that was previously raised. You talk of two departments not talking to each other, but it goes beyond the two departments. I hear that in the municipalities, at least they had targets that they set for themselves, but in national departments, the targets have not been set. And as the saying goes, if you can't measure it, don't do it. Procurement remains a stepchild in the strategic agenda. If you look at the APP, if you look at the strategic plan, there is nothing that talks to procurement, because the procurement plan is done as an aside. The procurement plan is due on the 31st March of the next year, just before the financial year begins for us in national government. The APP is already done. And for as long as there is no link between the outputs and the outcomes of the organization to what is it that they need to buy to achieve their objectives. We are not even scraping the surface, Sean. It is for that reason that when you talk about the issues that we are raising, being raised at, I think it was Advocate Zaluba who kept saying these issues need to be raised at a higher level, at a cluster level.
Yeah.
But for as long as they are not part of the strategic agenda, for as long as they are discussed as a by the way issue, we are still going to continue having challenges. Unfortunately, it is the procurement officials who suffer at the end. When there is no spend that is happening, all fingers are pointed at the procurement officials, but there is no conducive environment that is being prepared for them. If we talk about the 20 and the 10, how do we measure how we are doing against the 20 and the 10 that we have set against the specific goals? Who measures the difference that we are making in terms of these regulations? If we can't measure it, then the question is, why do it?
Mm.
Do we have to prescribe the measures for ourselves as departments? But how do you put a measure where it's not catered for in a template? Because we work according to templates. And the Department of Small Business Development, when you talk to the parliamentarians from that portfolio, they don't understand when you say, but we haven't received guidelines, we haven't received, the template has not been customized to accommodate this. They say, do you work according to a template? They don't understand. Is there a way that the process that we are dealing with, Sean, can assist them to at least get procurement in the strategic agenda, to be part of the C-suite discussion? Thank you.
Well done, well done. Absolutely. And this is again, everybody, this is your chance to get yourself onto the strategic. Not going to suddenly earn a right to not report to the CFO and report directly to the DG, the CRO, or whatever it might be. You've got to earn that. We have an opportunity to do that. It is also suggesting that we provide the fact that there's strategic planning process underway. All of that still said, we need an approved preferential procurement policy approved by the 16th of January. Let's wrap it up, everybody. I think we've probably got enough. I think. Sorry, Nomazulu, you raise your hand first, and then we'll go to Advocate Saluba.
Oh, hi, Sean. It's still Leonora, yes. I just
Leonora.
want to find out. Yes. I just want to find out, now that we have to change our policies, how different will be this regulation from the procurement bill? Because if it's different, why couldn't Treasury wait for the procurement bill to be finalized? Because of changing policies in between, I don't know.
Yeah, it's gonna be, they had no choice. They had no choice. Events just overtook them. The Supreme Court of Appeals decision, the Concourse decision, just got us to the point that we have no choice. Things have to change in 16. And the public procurement bill is just not advanced enough yet, and will take a long time. And we did discuss how long the public procurement bill will still take before it is effective. So we've got I think it's probably a year and a half before the public procurement bill actually has an impact on this discussion. They are different. The public procurement bill, the draft that was issued in February 2020, is it doesn't have the mechanisms in it that would guide us in any way in this discussion. Advocate?
Thank you, Sean. I think Sean well said. They did not have a choice, and also the process of amending an act is quite a process which they had to do some due diligence. However, it's important to understand that we need to brace ourselves, like Chair said, because a number of things, ideally you would have loved that what we're discussing could have formed part of the policy, because the policy debate is the reason we are where we are. Because the argument constitutionally is that the main policy was sufficient. There was nothing that was encouraging any further development by way of delegated legislation. However, Sean, I'm not there. I just want to talk about a way forward, Sean. I want to reiterate what I said when Treasury was in, and I want to repeat it just for ethical reasons. Sean, I believe that these are the reasons why you had a department called DPME, to be the one that pulls things together and then say, so what? That's why planning left Treasury to DPME. And this, for me, I find it as an opportunity for DPME to actually take charge. I wish they were here, to be the ones that actually begin to drive the agenda of what are the current strategic goals, even though they would say they are in the MTSF. Now, Fikile has spoken about the challenge we have in our planning processes. And this, for as long as we don't correct this, even in the ICT space, you sit with the same challenge. The challenge of us not understanding the importance of strategic and planning guidelines, which inform the enterprise. And those strategic and planning guidelines then transcend to even your support plans. When I say support plans, I'm talking about what Regulation 5.2 of Treasury talks about, your ICT, your procurement, your equity, everything that supports the master document. Now, this is an opportunity that forces us to get back to that which we lost a long time ago, if we once had it. And I think, Sean, it would be nice if Treasury would have been here and be encouraged at an executive level, not at a front end level, it's an executive level, to actually encourage DPME to own this and begin to develop something that would be, something that is equivalent to the evaluation plan that they developed, which has helped the country. Now you're looking about the setting of strategic objectives, strategic goals that must inform the country. These are not about procurement. They are about everything that you do in any state in response to national and international imperatives. So I'm then saying, Sean, if maybe I was in Sikayetu or I was in a province, my first step as a procurement person, I want to be very practical now. I would actually talk nicely to my CFO, because procurement happens to report to CFO, and maybe encourage the CFO to have a chat with, of course, you don't speak, you write, you just make just one pager dealing with the chaos. When you say dealing with the chaos, everybody would raise their eyes. And you just put this, not many bullets, because people don't want to reach this end of the year. And you then begin to say, what is it that you're proposing? And in the proposal, once now we're dealing with the final APP. Remember now the final APP is there. It is high time that before it gets signed, the accounting officer must know that there are these goals that are critical, that are going to be needed in the policy for procurement, which must be in the APP itself. Now, if you do that, you are driving the whole organization to actually own this problem, and it becomes less of supply chain. And for me, that would be the change, even the content of our APPs, and even the way then we relate with the support plans. One of the things that I just want to say, by the way, when I was presenting the timeline of government as part of governance, I used to tell my finance people and supply chain that I hear you when you say you want that in March, but according to my planning cycle, which is informed by the processes internationally and domestically, all support plans, I'm not accepting a strategic plan that does not have an ICT plan, that is not having a supply chain plan, that is not having a logistic plan. When you do that, you have a comprehensive thing as early as August, as early as November. And this is the paradigm that maybe we need slowly to move into. And it's unfortunate that supply chain should pioneer it. And I'm saying to them, they must take it. They must take the bull. This is the time. They must problematize it at the right level, because the APP must have visibility of what we're talking about. The moment that happens, it's going to be a bit easier for them to deal with the issues. And once more, I wish the supply chain all the best, because they are going to drive the agenda of strategic planning in a nice way.
Right, thanks, Advocate. We need to wrap up. There is, yeah, just in summary, midnight, 15th of January, Sunday. Some of us will have a party, some of us will have a little memorial service for 2017 regulations will die on the day. Monday morning, when people get back to work on the 16th of January 2023, we will have preferential procurement regulations will be approved preferential procurement policies needed in order for procurement of bulk cash to go ahead. Things will happen in the next few weeks. If you're not yet on the Telegram group, you're welcome to contact myself or anyone else that you might know who is on that group, and they will be able to send you a link. I can actually put that in the chat and try and do that now. That might actually help you. That is one way to just try and keep in touch with what's going on. Belinda, there could be some chaos. Yes, there could be a bit chaotic. We will attempt to have a Wednesday discussion on the 11th of January, the second Wednesday of the year. We will have this. We will hopefully try and consolidate any key developments that have taken place since then, and try and share with you if there is anything. The guidelines have been issued, for example, the guidelines from BPIC Health. If the SPD 6.1 is issued by Treasury, we'll certainly have a range of those things ready so that we can try and just guide you if you have some points. So we'll have a 11 January discussion to try and support you to deal with that. In the meantime, keep an eye also on the, I see your hand, Advocate. Do you want to come in, Advocate?
Thanks, Sean. My last request to you, man, just to assist the process. You'll forgive me. This is the place that I played a lot, and I would like us to be helpful to the supply chain people, just to make sure that the issues you are raising are covered. Is it possible that we can have what we call in the military a template on headings? I'm saying this because if then you have maybe it's not dictating, but it's assisting everybody, and it enables then that the salient issues that you have covered are not forgotten. Just there is just off the some headings that must be there in the policy. I'm trying to say this because you don't want us to have remember, we're at different levels in terms of policy writing. Some of the people have never gone to a policy writing course, and we are here to make sure that they are assisted. So I'm just probably requesting that, not undermining anyone, but assisting the process in line with what you have just said, to say what are the basic non-negotiable headings that must be there so that a person can, at the same thing we did with strategic planning. We decided that these are the headings that must be there in a strategic plan so that people can at least follow that and then add. That's my last request to you, Sean. And then we can actually then factor those issues that we're putting. Then a rough and dirty type of a can come up before the end of tomorrow from people, and they are able to take it to their supervisor and say, this is what I'm thinking we must do. Can you take it up through the echelon? And then you've transferred the risk to other people, and the discussion goes. Thanks, Sean.
Good one. Good point. Busy time, but we'll see. I put the link in the chat to the Telegram. If you're able to, you can actually install Telegram on your computer, your desktop, as well as, of course, on your mobile device. And it works the same as kind of WhatsApp, just some additional security features as well that also include there. We will also try and include this as well as other content in a OneDrive folder that we'll put together. We'll try and get that out and get this presentation and other stuff that we'll put all of this stuff also on the Telegram. One of the nice things about Telegram is if something is put on there, it doesn't take up any space on your device, because all of the stuff is just kept in the cloud, and it only takes device space up in the device. The liberty download the device. So don't get Belinda, don't get too concerned. There is no way that data is going to be pushed out. The 16th of January is not going to go. All the very best to you, for all of your you and your family for the next couple of weeks, it's going to be an interesting time. But hey, this is the time to shine. This is the time to take a leadership position in supply chain. It is not the time to go and curl up in a corner and wish that things will get better. It's not. It's going to take some leadership by the people that are here to make a difference, to make this thing working, to be ready by the 16th of January. We'll put this onto the YouTube channel for those that might have missed the earlier parts, and all the best to all of you. Thank you very much to all of you who contributed today, and take care.